Time and Lens, Trajectories of Women in Indian Cinema. And let me invite all the panelists to come up on stage. Anjum Rajabali, Alankrita Shrivastava, and Vaibhavi Kulkarni. Anjum Rajabali is a veteran screenwriter of 33 years and has penned several films like Drohakal, Ghulam, The Legend of Bhagat Singh, and Rajniti. He is the founder of the Film and Television Institute of India's screenwriting department and leads the Whistling Woods program. A mentor, workshop leader, and industry advocate, he won Select's Leading International Teacher Award in 2019. Alankrita Shrivastava is an award-winning filmmaker known for bold, women-centric storytelling. She co-wrote and directed Made in Heaven and created Bombay Begums. Her acclaimed films Lipstick Under My Burqa and Dolly Kitty or Wo Chamakte Sitare have won global recognition. A GQ Most Influential Young Indian, named in 2017, she has been reshaping Indian cinema. So please. And Vaibhavi Kulkarni, who is a professor at the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, holds a PhD from Rutgers University with a background in journalism and corporate communications. She studies rhetoric, organizational narratives, and meaning making. Her research delves into gender, culture, and society, exploring how communication shapes perceptions in both routine and strategic contexts. So may I again request Professor Basan to welcome all the panelists with stoles. All yours.
All right. Thank you, Pushkar, for those introductions. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome, Anjum. Welcome,
Thank you,
Alankrita.
Vaibhavi.
So, as Pushkar just informed you, none of us are actually historians, right? Um, yeah, better? All right, yeah. So as Pushkar informed you, none of us are historians. So what we bring today is not really a historian's account of how, women's journey has evolved through the last few decades. What we are bringing in is the very much the lived experience, right? Partly the lived experience and also practitioners' perspective of how women's journey has evolved. So Anjum wears many hats. He is a script writer. He advises directors on scripts. He teaches and heads the script writing department at Film and Television Institute of India. He also teaches at many other institutes. And of course, as you heard, Alankrita also is a prolific filmmaker, director. She started assisting with assistant director, right? Started as assistant director with Gangajal, went on to write films, and now she directs movies. Now, I am neither a practitioner nor a historian, right? I am a communications faculty. I do research in communication. But what interests me is how narratives influence our meaning-making process. Yeah? So when we look at a particular industry or when we look at a particular community, how do narratives, the narratives that we've heard, shape our understanding of how these industries or communities have evolved or what they are, what they mean for us, what they mean for others. And it's that perspective that I hope to bring today throughout this discussion. Um, can we start the slides, please? Yeah. Okay, that's a little late. Let's move on. So when I started my research for this particular panel, what struck me the most, I knew some of it, but really what struck me again, can we move on to the next slide? Maybe I can have a clicker. What struck me was, oh, there is one here, thank you. Sorry about that. Was, what a powerful role women played initially when Hindi film industry started, right? So we, of course, most of us may know about Devika Rani, Fatima Begum, both of them powerhouse of talent. Fatima Begum was a writer, she was a director, she had her own production house. Uh, Devika Rani, again, with Himanshu Rai, brought in several technological advancements to the industry. They both streamlined, the studio streamlined the industry to a large extent, and so on. And then, as I started looking at it more and more, um, thanks to also one of the references that Alankrita gave, thank you for that, which is Debashree Mukherjee's writings, I realized it's not just them, right? There are many other women around that time that ran production houses, yeah? And they are not remembered today. Most of them are forgotten today. So some of the names, for instance, you had Jadan Bai, now known more as being Nargis's mother, but she was also a music director and a producer. You have Pratima Das Gupta, you had Pramila. All of them ran their own production houses. Yeah? And this is not just off screen. Even on screen, um, women were big stars, huge stars, sometimes fan base 3 or 4 times their male counterparts. So again, big names, Silochana, Devika Rani again, Gohar, Nadia. And today when we talk about, there's so much discussion about pay parity um, when it comes to gender, when it comes to actors. These women commanded actually 3 or 4 times the amount of remuneration that their male counterparts commanded. So an example, again, while I was researching, I came across this poster. Many of the posters at that point of time, or when films were sort of marketed, they were marketed based on on the women actors. They were marketed. So this one, I don't know if you can see this one, Janmabhoomi. Yeah, it's Devika Rani with Ashok Kumar. But sometimes it will only be Devika Rani's name. Ashok Kumar, of course, was a big name by the time, but sometimes it will only be Devika Rani. Nadia's posters all over. It's this, and the second thing that stuck me, one was this, of course, the absolute star power that women commanded. The second thing that struck me was we've really forgotten many of these women. So I don't know if anyone saw Jubilee. Has anyone seen Jubilee? It was this, oh, some of you have, right? Yeah, so this is an article by Debashree Mukherjee, and she talks about Jubilee and what a wonderful series that is. But one of the things that she talks about also is, in that show, the protagonist, who's supposed to play Himanshu Rai, I think, and there is this he has this great idea, brilliant idea of playback music, yeah, and it's a pivotal moment. It's supposed to show us the genius of Himanshu Rai. But by most accounts, playback singing was really with the brainchild of Saraswati Devi. Yeah? Um, and it was her who really pioneered or had that idea. I mean, the counts vary between her and one more gentleman, but it's majority of them say, well, it was really her who had that idea. And we don't really know that now. So then, even in our myths, right, even in our myths related to the evolution of Hindi cinema, we don't have women, and that's how narratives are built, really. Um, I also, it's also very, it's also very sad that while women were such a powerful force, um, in the evolution of Hindi cinema initially, now they have they command, they don't command much of space either on screen or off screen when it comes to the power they hold, the power they wield. And with the exception of some, of course, but by and large it is still called very much a male dominated industry. And with that, I want to bring in both of you, to also maybe if we go all the way back and then try and understand the evolution that way, maybe we can talk a little about what was that era like, right? How is it that women were so powerful, right? That and they commanded, so much presence, they commanded authority, and now, over a period of time, the role sort of dwindling till, and the space kept shirking for women in cinema, particularly Hindi cinema in this case. Any thoughts? What was that era like, and why was that not sustained? Why were women not able to build on it or sustain that kind of momentum? Either one of you.
Honestly, Uh, actually, I don't have the answers to what happened, but basically, post India getting independence, I think the scenario changed immediately. Um, I think from the 50s onwards, it was no longer, women no longer held that kind of power either in the studio system or, from my understanding, or on screen. So neither behind the camera nor in front of the camera. And I mean, honestly, I don't know historically what happened as to why the situation changed in the 50s. But I think going from the 50s into the 60s, one can uh, see the female protagonist. And in the 50s, she became very like morally upright. In the 60s, she became, like that whole love story sort of thing started happening, though there was that rich and poor divide. And 70s and the angry young man came, by which time I think the female protagonist got really sidelined. So I don't know what shifted. Maybe, you can throw more light on it.
It's difficult to point to
One particular factor, yeah.
singular reason because there's a danger of it becoming reductionist there. But having read up a little bit and having perhaps mulled over it, I do believe that initially the influence of colonization at that time was very much there. The models were the English people. This is how, the aspirational models. And therefore, there, obviously, it being a more modern society than India, women were far more prominent. Doesn't mean that they sort of dominated or they were the influential gender, but it was there, owing to which it didn't remain a taboo. I mean, Nadia is actually Mary Evans. I mean, so she was a foreigner.
Same with Premila.
Yeah, West Asian blood.
Yeah.
Devika Rani, yes, she was the first female superstar, but then she also owned a studio with Himanshu Rai, and then, of course, Rerit, she married. So there was already a certain backing that she did have. And much as Vaibhavi, I sort of realized that you were feeling very good that there were so many women there, proportionately, it was still a male-dominated place. Okay, these exceptions were there, including Fatma Begum, Saraswati Devi, Devika Rani, of course. So it continued to be that, and then I would say, Alankrita, that even post-independence, there was still space on the slate of this, the concept of what Indian society is or nation is, and they were waiting also for the leadership to be able to carve out, because Mahatma Gandhi was, of course, immediately there for a year or half a year. Nehru, who was sort of hugely venerated, and he was there for some 17 years. So there was a progressive outlook, as a result of which also the concept of, I think, women's characterization somewhere also got equated with the nation building that they wanted. I mean, Matrabhumi, Bharat Mata, and the stellar example being Mother India. Of course, the name also is Mother India. First he said Aurat. I mean, like this is the quintessential what his vision of Aurat was. By the way, Mehboob Khan was completely illiterate. I mean, he couldn't sign his name. Okay, and it is said by his associates that he wouldn't recognize it if they made him sign. He wouldn't know who signed this. So he was, but he was rooted, and he had a certain vision of what India should be. And there was austerity, there was sacrifice, there were challenges, there were enormous, impossible hardships, all of which went into the character arc of Radha in Mother India. Even the name Radha was taken up from mythology. I mean, thank God he didn't take Sita, okay? Because that would have been something else totally. And today, of course, we would have had trouble. So given that, I'm saying, yes, what she's saying, morally upright, because this was also what they believed the standard should be for Indian society. And they, Mehboob somewhere, all his films, if you see, women are very prominent. Andaz, if you look at Aurat, of course. Okay, so that they were leading, they were leading the plot.
Yeah, and they were being paid accordingly. So they had about 30,000 per month. I mean, apparently, at that point of time, studios retained actors, right? It was almost like employees. And women's salaries were about 20 to 30,000 per month, which was quite a lot according to, that time. And it also gave them financial freedom, which many other professions didn't. So yeah, so they had that, of course, women were strong,
Again, in a
powerful.
small proportion is what I'm trying to point out. Okay, I mean, so I know you want to feel good about this, but you might want to temper it a little bit because there is a reality check. I'm saying the dream began to crack. Again, at the risk of sounding reductionist, the dream began to crack by the late 50s. It had already been more than 10 years. And corruption had already begun to come in. Poverty was not going anywhere. The feudal exploitation was very much continuing. There was enormous distress. Crop failures would lead to large-scale depression and hardships. I'm saying, given that, an escapist form of cinema began coming in. So the rom-coms
Eventually.
took over. Now, in the rom-coms, then again the version was that the women became an object to be pursued,
Yeah,
a romantic
so-
object to be pursued. And that is where you have the Shammi Kapoor phenomenon.
Right. So hold on.
Do you
so
have
if
that?
we have, so we have Mother India, of course, and
So Mother India is 1957.
1957.
Guide
and
is
the
1965. So we're already into that. And that was, of course, R.K. Narayan's story and Vijayanand. So it also depended on people who were actually spearheading it. People, the writers or the writer-directors who were there. Their vision and their clout. Like Vijayanand had already given a few hits with
Yeah.
Devanand. So it was not so difficult for him to pull this off with distributors. And it's Navketan International, which was their own production house, owned by Devanand. So you see, if you had that kind of clout, then you could afford to take that chance. And of course,
To
there
make a
was
movie like
S.G.
that,
Burman's
yeah. And of
music,
course,
Sire.
tremendous budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
S.G. Burman music, sorry. So given that, I'm saying that this whole 60s became that period. Now, before you could have or even think of, perhaps with the evolution of women in society, which had already begun to happen, that a change might come about, here we have the Salim Javed phenomenon and Amitabh Bachchan, which completely wiped out the role of women. I mean, it has been my contention, and I think, invoked many people's wrath, people who are supporters of Salim Javed's work, that the feminine factor in their films was token, effectively negligible. You took them out, and more or less, nothing would really change except for an incident or two, which could well have been substituted by a side character. So their focus was purely on the male force there. And I don't think that they designed it keeping in mind the larger anger in society against growing corruption, because there's early 70s and things which had sort of begun, and then of course led to the emergency. There was enormous turmoil in the country. They wrote because of their personal angst. They were personally angry, and they had issues with whatever figures of authority.
Yes,
in
they've
their
talked
family.
about it. Yeah.
So given that, so I'm not saying that it resonated with a political anger amongst the classes, but yes, this gave an outlet of violence to the simmering anger which may have been there, okay, in people. And it was very appealing. Violence is always, has always been violence and sex, one of the mainstays. So as a result of which, gradually the woman began to recede into the background, and she didn't really affect the plot. You heard of the Bechdel's test?
Of course. Yeah.
You have, yeah.
But can we explain it for?
Yeah, I'll only take a key question from the Bechdel test. Okay, there are three questions. They're very, very simple, and you might feel, come on, this would apply to most films. The question is there at least one scene in your film where two women characters are talking not about the male character? 70% of films fail this test. You see, this is, and I checked with, I think,
So next, so I
with,
think we moved to 75.
yeah, I checked with
I think
a film which I had written, I think it was Rajniti or something, and it failed. You don't even think about it. Okay, because if it's being led by the male character, so everything is determined in modern narrative, in screenplay writing, it's driven by the plot. And the characters interplay with the plot. And if the main character happens to be a male guy, then in which case, then all the subplots, etc., are essentially, either feeding off that or feeding into that. There. And it so happened that it wasn't there. And I sort of hold myself up as, in a way, in my heart, I'm a feminist, I'm definitely progressive, and I hold very liberated views, and there you go. Because it is such a deep-rooted tradition and practice that it doesn't even occur to you. So it's important, yes, the one has to be conscious of it, and I'm sure Alankrita is going to talk about that also, about what are the various initiatives there are for gender sensitization, and we can also talk about that. But I'm saying it is so deeply ingrained.
Yeah, Alankrita, you want to weigh in? I know you have some thoughts too about how this evolved and also women's voice and
Yeah.
why women characters are not celebrated as much. Yeah.
So I think what I feel is that there's a very deep connection between the women we see on screen and whether there are women behind the camera who are shaping those stories and molding those stories and deciding what is the story to be told, from whose point of view, and how are we going to see that story unfold. So I think which is why I feel like post-independence, behind the camera, women really took a backseat. And like I was saying, I don't know exactly what happened, but, and as they were not there behind the camera as writers or directors or producers, the stories were consistently being told from a very male point of view, with male protagonists, with male concerns, and male ideas of how women should be. Which is why, say, even a film like Sangam, it's very much about a woman upholding propriety as being married. And so those kind of values, which I feel were patriarchy's way of being like, this is what women should be, or then she's a cabaret dancer, so then she's like that. So very reductive, also very convenient to put women into boxes to serve certain roles. They must be they must be sacrificing women, they must be virgins, they must be very pure, they must do everything, whatever is the call of duty. So morally very black or white. So either pure, or then they're just vamps and they're very loose characters and they don't deserve respect, because if they are supposedly sexually active and all of that. So I think what happened was that this boxing of women, and also taking the agency away from them, or not letting them have agency, was to do with the fact that there were no women telling the stories. They were not writing the stories, they were not making those films, they were not producing those films. So what we saw is just the male version of male ideas of what a woman can be, should be, how she should sort of play herself out. And in creating that, it's also like all the economics of the film industry, whether it is money that went into production, into making male stars, into marketing, into creating an idea for the audience that this is the kind of film you pay for. You pay for the male hero. That's what we have been taught. So the audience was also taught that this is what a film is. This is the center of the universe for the film. It has to be this male hero. And mostly upper caste, sitting on top of the privileged pile in many ways, or then
Or underdog.
or
Who's
underdog who sort of takes on the system or whatever. But a very clear I mean, I think it was a very systemic shutting down or not letting women have their voice. It was systematic. It was in exhibition, in marketing, in production, in every sphere. So I think where we are today is that we're again trying to take baby steps forward, is also a result of a very real discrimination, which nobody really, often acknowledges. So I think that's how it kind of got shaped. And then when you see in the 70s, then there was the smaller, middle of the road films that started giving space to women again, like the Rishikesh Mukherjee kind of films. There was Sai Paranjpe
Right.
after some time. And so then there was like this undercurrent of, no, there are other stories to be told. And, the Aparna Sen started, she made 36 Chaurangi Lane and all of that. So I think then, I'm just talking, so then sort of I think some stuff started in terms of let's try and tell women's stories from their points of view, their perspectives, which doesn't mean there were never any films in those periods, but very
Yeah,
few
those are the
and
exceptions.
very few and far between. But what I'm saying is that there's a very clear connection. If there are not going to be any women who have the opportunity to tell stories about how they see the world, how they see their lives, how they see the lives of women around them, then that status quo keeps getting perpetuated, which is what has happened. So basically, I feel like one can't discuss what's on screen without discussing the very deep discrimination that has been there behind the scenes in every way, that has been sort of going on for a really long time.
We may just add a supplement to this,
Yeah, yeah.
please. Yeah. See, it's also a self-reinforcing vicious cycle, which Alankrita is referring to, I think. One is that there has been a long-standing narrative tradition where, through mythology, through our epics, through even Greek mythology, where all the male heroes, because the patriarchal tradition has ensured that the interpretation that we have of our own two epics is completely male-dominated, where the men are valorous, they are noble, they are sacrificing, they are courageous, they fight wars and defend kingdom, and they're women. And the women are the complications. The women are vulnerable, they're weak, therefore they cause issues in the plot, which these people have to then defend their honor for. Now, yeah, I'm saying, given this, when this dovetails into cinema, okay, then the same thing continues. Now, given that it continues, the amount of investment that it attracts, the amount of effort and focus that it attracts increases there, because these are the films people are used to, these kind of stories they're used to, dominated by male heroes. So they begin to work. They work, so therefore more money is invested in that. Now, I'll give you a parallel example which is striking me. Take the case of cricket, okay? Everybody watches cricket, and more investment and advertisement money is poured into that because there's viewership. But the viewership didn't happen just by itself. The viewership happened because a decision was taken that we will market this sport as a commercially profitable, viable sport. And they began doing that. Why isn't hockey, for example, which was meant to be the national sport, why isn't hockey have an IPL or Virat Kohli kind of stars? And they're very talented players here. 1.4 billion in this country, you'll find enormous talent. But it was a conscious decision, and then it becomes a cycle. It reinforces that because there's more viewership, since you glamorized it so much, so there is more investment, there's more investment, stars are paid more, and it goes on, and it becomes a fait accompli. When I go with a script, or she goes with a script, even if it is a great script that she's written, okay, with women characters, like say Lipstick or the others, it's like, yeah, it's nice, but the audience for this is not very much. So whether it's a Sai Paranjpe or a Rishikesh Mukherjee's Khoobsurat or Alankrita's Lipstick, then a limited amount, ke itna shayad nikal aayega. Nobody is there today in this overly commercialized industry to make that breakthrough with a certain vision, like Shapurji Palanji had with Mughal-e-Azam. He took a huge risk, investing an enormous amount of money there, and when in fact K. Asif got cold feet and once went, it's a very nice incident, and told him after when he was mounting the set of Pyar Kiya To Darna Kya, that is what he wanted in color, and he wanted to spend a lot of money because all those mirrors, and he wanted to be a spectacular dance. He got cold feet and went to Shapurji Palanji saying, I made a big mistake, I'm just losing your money. What if nobody comes to see it? What was that fellow's answer? Fellow meaning that gentleman's answer. He said, when did I say that I'm making it for the audience? Even if only I see it, I'm going to enjoy it. Now, obviously, it's a
Yes.
way of saying it, but the fact is that there were these people who said, let's break out of this and do something and take a risk. Storytelling is a risk. No one takes that because it's also overly commercialized. So it's a fait accompli. कि अलंकृता इतना ही पैसा मिलेगा, आप बनाओ, लेकिन इतना ही मिलेगा क्योंकि रिकवरी अगर नहीं भी हुई तो लॉस इतना ही होगा हमारा. That risk taking. So it's become a self-generative thing. So she's right, economics have hugely added to that, and now it's almost set in concrete. I mean, the disparity in pay packets
Yeah.
between the top female star's payment and the top male star's payment is nothing short of 10 to 15 times. 10 to 15 times. I mean, well, we may say that today women are in power, Deepika, Alia, Anushka, Priyanka. You look at the economics and you will know exactly what the difference in their power is.
Were Sridevi, I mean, stars like Sridevi, Madhuri Dixit, were they the exception, or they encountered
In terms
the
of
same
pay?
thing? In terms
No.
of pay.
If they had some really secondary actor playing their male lead, I mean, which sometimes they would.
The
because-
movie like Raja. where-
Yeah, so no actor, leading actor would want to play, the male lead when Sridevi had the prominent role. I mean, it was led by her. So it would obviously be a bit of an issue. Even in Mr. India, where she had a fantastic role, it's Mr. India, which is Mr. Kapoor.
Yeah.
Okay. So there also the pay disparity was very much there. Very much there. Okay. And what was she called? What was Madhuri called? The Amitabh Bachchan, the female Amitabh Bachchan. Okay. Let's see if anybody is going to be called the male Deepika Padukone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but also the movies that did work, I feel, that were women-centric. I mean, Aurat or Mother India, or later on movies like Tapasya, women were particularly strong. They were still strong for their family members. So they were strong for their children. They were strong for their husbands, or they were strong for parents, or whoever. So centered very much within the family, um, and not really because of their individual desires or individual ambitions. Those were few and far in between. I think, and that trend continued for quite a while, even with Rishikesh Mukherjee's movies and others. The women don't really have a very clear profession, or they're centered within homes. That continued for a while. I did And I'm wondering, when I look at the advent of parallel cinema, there was such a, I mean, the movies were so beautiful and women-centric and strong, and that movement didn't sustain again, right? It was there. We had amazing filmmakers. We had men who made fantastic movies, women who made fantastic movies, and then that didn't, that, so why didn't it replace?
Economics. There was NFDC, there was Lalit Bijlani and Srini Variyava, and there was Manmohan Shetty, these new films. These were the three main funders. Okay, NFDC dried up. The government itself withdrew from there. Again, the commercialization has led to a fixed position that if a film is not validated by the market, it has no business to exist. Don't make another film like that again. So to make a breakthrough, there has to be a gestation period, because what you're doing is you're reorienting the expectations of the audience. You're making them also slowly realize steadily that these are wonderfully engaging and entertaining films. One can get great dramatic and emotional satisfaction out of female-led roles, and I mean in films. But you need to have that gestation period, which NFDC was beginning to do. You see, films like Manthan were commercially successful. Ardha Satya was hugely successful. 20 weeks in novelty cinema. Okay.
Yeah, which is why I wonder why it didn't sustain. But you actually started, I'm sorry, pitch in, and then I have a question, but please pitch.
No, I was saying that it's also connected to the 80s, because also people stopped going to the theater and started watching films on video.
Yes.
The whole VCR technology came, and also there were not so many women. There was Kalpana Lajmi made a few films, and Sai Paranjpe was there before her.
Aparna Sen was
And
there,
Aparna Sen,
yeah.
who was making films
Yeah,
mainly not
yeah,
in
but
Hindi,
not
but
Hindi, yes.
yeah. So it wasn't like there were so many women. There were like literally 2, 3 women. So that's what I wanted to
That
say.
is
It was
what
not
you,
like
yeah.
there were so many women in that movement. That
I
movement was
think there were
also,
never so many women.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right.
There were that movement was also largely led by men, but at least female actors got space because there was more space for the female uh, protagonist.
And the
But I think the video
protagonists were
cassette
evolved. Yeah.
also went a long way in ending it, I feel.
Yeah, but you came around that time, right? So Govind Nilhani, you started with Govind
Yeah,
Nilhani.
but post the 80s, I came in
Dhrokal, yes,
1992. Yeah,
yes,
with
Dhrokal.
Drohakal.
Um, so when you came in, we still, I mean, we just gotten out of 80s where women were watching everything in VCR and so on. As you started your career as script writers, what was the, what's the sort of brief that was given to you, or what kind of movies? So when, someone's saying, okay, write a script for me, or this is the idea, this is what you need to do, were there any specific boundaries, so as to speak, related to women characters? Or related to men, this is how a male character historically, how has script writing evolved?
See, the early assignments that I did, barring the one with Govind, which was Drohakal, I mean, I don't know, many people may not have seen Drohakal. It was a very good, strong story, and it was Govind's. I mean, the good things about the film are because of Govind Nihalani, I'm telling you. The weaker things are my work, because I rewrote the screenplay about 4 times. I mean, he had a beat sheet which wasn't working for him. Okay. But it was Govind was making it, okay? And so you have the woman character who was very strong, Meeta Vashisht, and yeah, she was good. And she was an anchor to the male lead. After that, the films which came, the brief wasn't a conscious, deliberate, verbalized brief that, okay, women can't be this, except once, when I had characterized the mother character, actually, of the heroine. It was a triangle. It didn't get made. The heroine, I mean, the female lead, she was in love with somebody who was a poor man, okay, in Kashmir. The other one, there was an army man who was in love with her. Okay. And the mother was keen that she marry the army person because it would also be secure for the girl as well as for herself in the future. Abhi ye lafantar kya karne wala hai? You know, he's already a little disturbed and all. So in one scene, she's trying to very subtly convince the daughter that actually this guy, the major, might be very good, he's nice looking, he'll take you places, and all the wonderful things about him. And the daughter realizes what she's saying, and she questions that, and she says, no, but all that is true, but I love this guy. Finish. Oh, the huge debate about that. How can the mother character be like that? This I'm talking about mid-90s. How can the mother character be like that? When you can't, this is Indian audience. You can't. And then the discussion went on to women. There is that you and I may not agree, but this is what the public want. Take a chance, pal. Take a chance and do something with sincerity and do it in such a way that it is an engaging, script, an engaging sequence. What is your problem?
So, in fact, that reminds me of Libas, the movie Libas that ultimately got shelved. I think didn't really.
Gulzar Saabs.
Gulzar Saabs. Again, I think same thing. And they were like, okay, this censorship sort of was an issue at that point of time. So very much about what can and cannot be portrayed on screen. You've had that issue. You've challenged censorship with your movie about what can and cannot be portrayed on screen.
See that, yes, hers, there was a direct confrontation because very clear, she was
Right.
clear. There was a certain transparency about the way the women were characterized and what is it that were their hidden aspirations. And so beautifully it was brought out. I'm saying also in more subtle ways, like what I'm doing. You and I may disagree. I don't agree with this, this kind of regressive character, but this is what the public wants. And I told you, we are the public. I also go and watch movies and I enjoy them and I will enjoy this. So it's the subtle ways in which this patriarchal thing comes out. Okay, it's so deeply introjected, so deeply ingrained that it is a fact of life. Aisa hi hota hai. That is the final killing answer. कि ये ऐसा ही होता है. It's like concrete. इसको आप तोड़ नहीं सकते.
You've battled that, right? And you've now, of course, made extremely strong women characters, films about women, films that challenge the norms. What has your journey been like? How has it been challenging those norms?
I mean, first of all, I don't think I set out to be like, I want to challenge the norms. I think I just wanted to tell the stories that I feel for, that I feel I would want to see on screen, that I feel passionately about, that's something that I want to explore. So I think I never, I didn't, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do something now which has to, I mean, I don't think it was that kind of like an activism kind of a cinema or a path or anything. I wanted to make films, I wanted to tell stories, but stuff that I'm interested in, that I feel women like me uh, will be interested in watching, hopefully some men too. Um, so I think for me, it really was a journey of finding my own voice and figuring out what is it that I want to say. And I think when I started making films, I realized it's really hard. Uh, I think I hadn't reflected on it, that when I made my first film, Turning 30, which was about this girl who's headed towards her 30th birthday and everything sort of goes wrong in her life. And she's just having a crisis about turning 30 and not figuring out her life. I think after I made that film and we were really struggling to figure out how to release it and all that, is when it struck me that it's not so simple, to put your film out. I'm not even talking about the behind the scenes struggles. I'm just saying about actually uh,
Someone
putting,
distributing.
like, yeah, putting your work out there and realizing it's not what people are used to watching, not what they are expecting to see in a theater and all of that. But I have to say, I was very encouraged by actually the audience response to the film, because a lot of people watched it in the theater, because that time there was like this digital thing and all hadn't come in. And I think that film, though it didn't do well commercially, it was a very low budget film, and even then it didn't really make money. But the kind of love I got for the film from women across the country, I think it just taught me one thing, that you just have to keep doing what you want to do, what you feel strongly about, and just stay with it. A way will figure itself out. And I think I'm still, still working with that same feeling, because it's still as hard to put my work out there, to get it made. And but it's just that I feel like actually there is an audience. It may be smaller, it may be like I'm still collecting that audience, but I think that's what keeps one going, because you feel like those stories do resonate with people. They feel seen, they feel heard, they feel their stories are being told, and they don't have that otherwise. So I think it's very I think that has been the mainstay of my journey, of just trying to figure why I'm doing what I'm doing, even though it's hard, but to feel like there's a reason and there's a purpose. And I'm not just telling that story for myself, but by
Right.
telling it for myself, I'm actually telling it for so many other women who feel their stories are not told.
Which actually brings to our constant conversation about women need to be off camera and need to be playing a role in filmmaking for us to be able to make these kinds. And I want to shift the conversation a little. Till now we've talked about the portrayal of women on screen. I want to shift the conversation to off screen, right? Who are the women behind the camera? And I, I was reading this report, in TIS report, and they were talking about, just in 2023, it was a fairly recent, or at least after 2020, they looked at movies, 35 movies, and in general, there were only about 4,000 women in, crew members, as opposed to 26,000 men. Um, and we seem to have lost that art of sort of bringing women on. Uh, Interestingly, I don't know how many of you know, but B.R. Vijayalakshmi, she was not only the first cinematographer in India, she was the first woman cinematographer in Asia. Yeah, and she was a trailblazer at that point of time. I sort of got down into this rabbit hole and started reading more about women cinematographers, and then came across this really wonderful interview of three current women cinematographers, Dipti Gupta, Priya Seth, Fozra Fatima, and they talk about how they worked in movies that have that have been commercial success, or they have choreographed videos that have been commercially successful. Supriya talks about Airlift, right, being, and she felt like, oh, this is great. Like, I have arrived, and I'm going to kind of now get more offers. People recognize Airlift was a successful movie. A lot of work went to it, etc. And then she says, here's what she says. She essentially says that the films don't add up. So for male cinematographers, if you had one success and then another, you will be, it'll be like a journey. Whereas she's talking about how every movie is sort of like an island. You do that and then again you're struggling. And you do that and again you're struggling. And the other thing that Dipti talks about is they said, oh, we really liked so and so video. We liked how how you were, the work that you did. And she'd be like, okay, so do you want to work with me? And she'd be like, no, we're waiting for a woman-centric film, right? And as soon as we produce one, we would, we are looking to have you. And she was like, a cinematographer is a cinematographer. How does it matter? So it is very much, and then again, like I said, I went down a rabbit hole. So I was looking then at numbers. And so currently, this is 2023 by Ormax Media along with Amazon Prime. This thing that we have only 8% women directors currently, right? And about 7% women cinematographers. What is it, right? What will it take? What are the systems in place? Why is it still now? Though despite, so you have Amazon Prime saying that we want women behind camera. We have people training women. What is going on and what will it take to change the system?
First of all, this is quite an improvement on how things were a few years ago. So it was really, really paltry, the number of women in cinema. So women behind the camera in certain roles. So I think going back to that thing of, that women were not in powerful enough positions, but also how will women become, say, how will a woman become a director? Earlier in our times, the system was that you at least started off as an assistant director, which means there need to be many more assistant directors on a set, or many more, for a female cinematographer to be there, there need to be many more assistant cinematographers who are female on a set. So one issue is definitely like having more people start at an entry-level position. So just to put it in context, my first film I assisted on Gangajal, there were only 3 women on set. I was an assistant director, there was a costume assistant, and there was a hairdresser. That's it. And there was a crew of 200 odd people. And there were only 3 women. So that was the kind of, the composition of a typical... Yeah, and this is... That was how it was.
He'd already made Mrityudan before this. It was led by Madhuri, headlined by her. And yet, it's not that Prakash is constantly or consciously discriminating.
It was just how the system was.
It didn't occur to them.
It didn't occur to me also when I started working that there are only 3 women on set. It was just the system. It's only later when I started directing that I started reflecting on how many women are there, why are there such few women, and I had a crew which had many more women, and that felt like a very different place. So one is that there were not enough women entering the profession, which is, I think, to do with society, feeling like the film industry is not a great space, so there's that. The second thing is even women who enter, how many of them are able to sustain themselves till they actually reach that powerful position, which is very, very hard, because you can still easily become an assistant director. It's much harder to break in as a director. It's becoming easier, but it's still very, very hard. And then after you become a director, to sustain yourself as a director, because then to do that, you need people who believe in what you want to say, how you want to say it, and want to put money into your work. So it's not like rising in the corporate ladder. It's different, because you need to win the trust of a lot of patriarchal systems and people in place who are going to give you, be willing to assign that money for you to tell the story you want to tell. So it's a bit more complex than just going up in a profession. And I think the thing with not having so many women on set, like, it's a self-perpetuating thing. The fewer women there are on set, the harder it is for women to come onto a set. And I think with cinematographers, it's particularly, there's this kind of bias about women not being good with technology. So even for Priya to do Airlift, it was because she had shot Raja's earlier film and she had been working with him. He really fought for her. Every person told him, ये तो action film hai with Akshay Kumar, you cannot take a female cinematographer. He really put his neck on the line and fought for her, and that's why she shot that film. And every director may not be able to do that. So it is true that, and even after she shot Airlift, which was a huge success, she didn't get those big films. The next big film she shot actually was Pippa, which is also Raja's film. You know, so there is a bias that women, for some reason, are, and I think it's to do with with society's bias of women in science, and also women and physical work, because if cameras are big or whatever. But actually, if you, it's not like every male cinematographer, some super fit person who can actually
Yes.
do everything. So it it's just very, very illogical, but it's just a very
Ingrained.
deep bias. And there's
Deep-rooted
also
one.
class issue, which is that the cinematography teams, I mean, they have to look, they have a huge lighting department, you know, and they have gaffers and all who work with them. Those are entirely male crews, and that's also because there is this sort of a class system which is there in the film industry. And say the lighting department, they come from maybe less privileged backgrounds. And I feel that also, like, because there are those those class issues intersect with all those biases, it becomes like a woman can't be here, and how will she deal with the lightmen and things like that. So there are those kind of issues vis-a-vis cinematography. And I feel with direction there are different issues, which is what is the story she wants to tell. And also, it's not if a woman says, though there's been Farah Khan, you know, who I think has been an icon in terms of
Directing and
directing
even
very
choreography.
big, no, very directing very big commercial films. But it's very hard for women, if even if they say, okay, we don't want to tell the stories that, you know, which I was about complicated women and things like that. Even if they're like, we want to go into a very hardcore commercial space, even that's very hard for them to break into. So it's because then they'll be like, but you can't do this, you're a woman. So, you know, it works both ways. They're like, why do you want to tell your story? It's not going to sell. And then if the person is like, okay, I'll do that other thing, they're like, but no, no, no,
No,
I
no,
think a
this
man
is
will do it better. So, you know,
because
the bias works
both, yeah, it's yeah.
both
In
ways.
fact,
So those are some of the reasons. And I do think that there has been no affirmative action about studios and everybody being clear. I think now with writers and all, there is, I think Amazon and Netflix are pretty proactive about wanting more women in writers' rooms, because, and they're like, okay, like it can't have only, like a, you know, a show can't be written only by men. At least get one woman onto the table. So I think there has been some sort of proactive steps that have, you know, been taken. And of course, I think when you have more women directors, they always subconsciously or consciously or actively, they tend to have more women on their sets. They have more women HODs. Like, I know when I was doing Bombay Becomes, which I was creating and show running, I made sure all the other writers are female, like there was a very huge female crew. And I was very clear about it that I wanted more women to be involved in the show. So some of it, I think, has to come from that consciousness. You know, in the West, they have, of course, done a lot of things. Like they've made it mandatory to have crews which are at least 30% of the crew is female and all of that, which is not the case here. But I think studios have to start funding more material, more films, I think, which are led by women behind the camera for things to change.
yeah, and I feel like sometimes it's not even just about physical strength or the nature of task. Though you're absolutely right about cinematographers. There's this really funny incident that I read where a cinematographer, she was told, "Oh, do you know how much a camera weighs?" You know, and they bet $100 if she could lift a camera. And she lifted two at a time and then ended up getting $200 for it. But even choreographers, Saroj Khan, when she came in, we again the whole story of how many women choreographers we had, makeup artists, women as makeup artists. So they've all fighting sort of their own battles. Though, like you said, now hopefully with OTT platforms coming in, things may change a little. I'm not too sure. Uh, Anjum, you
No,
wanted
I
to weigh
want
in,
her
yes?
to just add one incident.
Yeah.
When Netflix initiated the gender sensitization like a master class where somebody came to talk about okay, what kind of behavior could be uncomfortable, could be interpreted as, sexually unacceptable, etc. How was the crowd of men sitting there receiving it?
Yeah. So basically, now what has happened is that the platforms have started. I mean, Netflix had started it, where when a shoot is starting, they do this kind of with the crew, like a kind of explaining what is sexual harassment on a set, what does it mean, what are the boundaries, how you can behave. But I was just telling Anjum sir that, like one of the first ones that I attended, which was like, it was very interesting to see how the crew, like, they got a really nice NGO to, explain everything and all. But the crew that was attending, they were like getting just bored looking at their phones. They're like, when can we leave? So obviously not enough engagement. But having said that, I think they post Me Too, I think that things, there is a little more awareness. At least I think women feel like they can speak up if something happens. It is a little bit like, I think the atmosphere on a set, from that perspective, I think there's a little bit more. But obviously, I mean, it's another topic.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine if you're saying only, when you started or even now, very few women would feel very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable place to be in, particularly because it's an informal this thing. It's not a formal corporate sector where you can complain, where you can, do these things. So that would make them
Yeah, but now
extremely
there are
vulnerable.
systems in place. Like when you're shooting, there's a number you can call. It's incumbent upon the production house to have that, like who can you call, etc. So those things I think are becoming better. There's some, and I feel like a woman might speak to a senior female colleague on set, which is why I feel it's very important to just have more women on a set. It's just much more like normal, and it changes the atmosphere on a set for sure.
No, you're saying no.
She's right, in a way, about that class, that category of, you know, departments, or that category of women who educated, intelligent, they are, and there's a degree of self-confidence, so they are able to make that phone call or make a complaint to get that behavior rectified, knowing full well that the seniors would take action and ensure that this doesn't happen, and she wouldn't get victimized with that. By and large, I mean, there are still those who do feel victimized. Yet even in this class, I'm saying, I mean, you do have reports. I mean, Sayani Gupta's recent revelation that on a particular shoot, there was a kissing scene, and the director called cut, and the male actor continued to kiss her, even though that was clearly audible that he'd said cut, because why did he do this? Because he could. He believed he could get away with it. And did anything happen after that? Nothing. Sayani reveals it now, because there is a certain kind of reluctance.
She has some power now,
yeah. Even the other young leading actress, I mean, Fatima Sana Sheikh, I mean, she also revealed in an interview that the director sort of said, okay, you will get the role, etc., but you have to cooperate in every which way, whatever it is expected out of you. And clearly it was there because she pushed it, and he emphasized in every way, no questions asked. So, of course, she dropped that. But these are still, I would say, smaller number. I'm talking about the vulnerability which is so endemic in the, what we call the, in the rung of the hierarchy, the lower levels, junior artists, female junior artists, and dancers. I mean, and I know that there's a union there, and there are agents who give work because the film director or producer contacts the agent. How do you think the agent chooses? There are favors which are demanded, not just a cut of their pay, which they're too weak to refuse. So part of that paltry sum, daily sum, goes there. The insecurity remains that tomorrow, day after, I may not get this job. So jo mil raha hai wo le lo, bird in hand. See, and sexual favors clearly are demanded. Now, why does this continue? As I said, it continues because it can, for the simple reason is that they feel victimized if they complain. Now, the important thing is to have structures in place which will offer that protection. And it is possible for the leadership of the film industry, whether it's a guild, other leaders of various associations, to ensure that their departments are protected, because the Federation of Western India Senior Employees, for example, is a federation of 22 craft unions. That means the entire film industry workforce is covered by that. All they have to do, in conjunction with the Producers Guild and the other producers associations, is initiate these concrete structures that yes, it will be confidential, action will be taken, and your job will be protected and your safety will be protected. Once this comes into place, you see the flood of complaints. When this Me Too movement began, I'm sorry to say this, but at that, when it began itself, when Tanushree Datta raised that, there was a clear feeling that I had that this is going nowhere. Precisely because of this. The point is, unless they complain, there is no redressal. Because you don't know what's going on outdoor shoots, etc. And I'm sorry to say, it's still rampant. Because they can get away with it. And those women feel vulnerable. What are you doing to protect them so that they can be encouraged to come and make the complaint so that action can be taken without any backlash coming on them? That, until that is in place, nothing is going to change. And that didn't happen. And it's not that we don't have progressive-minded people, sensitive people heading these various guilds, etc. But that it's so deeply rooted, they feel, okay, let's not rock the boat. Let's not rock the boat, which means throw those women to the wolves. Effectively, that's what it translates for them. There's big disheartenment amongst those junior artists. Very few associations, which means trade unions, have an internal committee. I mean, SWA, Screen Writers Association, is one of them. Certain units have that, and I'm glad to see that in contracts, there is a clear clause. Now, you also must have seen that leading production houses have that if there is any indication, any complaint of sexual harassment at the workplace, POSCO will be invoked and action will be taken against you, blah, 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 and severe. Thing will be withheld, credit withheld, AAO, etc. All of us sign that. But that is for whom? That is for senior professionals, heads of the department. Those people then generally don't indulge in this because there is a certain sense of control which they exercise on themselves. The others, I've seen outdoor shoots. It is disgusting. I mean, I can't even give you the details much as I'm bursting with outrage, but just take my word for it, at least as an observer. It's still there and it is continuing until this is done.
And historically, this has been in place.
It has increased. You see, there is, I mean, actually, I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. India is difficult to define that this is the Indian way or what. Very difficult because India is not a country. I mean, India is not even a continent. I think India is a planet unto itself. There's so much of contradiction, so much complexity here. But yeah, you do find that amongst the more educated classes, the upper classes, there's far more is sort of awareness about such things, and therefore that you do find that the role and position of women and their sense of social self-confidence is increasing and galloping in some respects, and fantastic. Yet I'm saying, amongst the lower classes, I mean, Vaibhavi, how many conflicts are there in so-called human civilization? I'm saying so-called because I don't think we are civilized, really speaking, until this issue is addressed. Racial, national, I mean, India hates Pakistan that way. You have class conflict, you have communal conflict, you have caste, and then you have gender. And that is fundamental to all these conflicts. The oppressed person who's being exploited and harassed by somebody who's superior to him, like the Dalit, let's say, will go home and hammer his wife. So he's a victim himself of bullying, but he'll go home and there's no escape from that. So until this is addressed as the most fundamental challenge facing human civilization, which of course the film industry is one example of that, because the film industry also is an anthropologist's delight. It's like a world within a world. It's pretty closed in that sense. Things don't go out really. And people generally, this is their world, almost their entire world. तो बात बाहर आती नहीं है उसके अंदर, बाकी जगह शायद आए ना आए, तो वो it perpetuates. It perpetuates, and cognizance is not taken of it, it's not acknowledged, and of course no action is taken.
Do we see hope in OTT platforms? Do we think with the platforms coming in, with more sensitization, they operate as corporate sector to some extent, and they do have more formal structures in place. We see them insisting, at least when you look at interviews, when you look at their policies, we do see them insisting that we need more women. There has to be an X percentage of women, exactly what you're saying. They're saying, okay, we want 30% or 40% women, etc. do we see that
No, that
as
30%, 40% I was talking was not about what the platforms are doing here. That I was saying about the crew composition in the
no,
West.
in some of the interviews
No, they
recently?
say that they would definitely want more women in, they don't, like they definitely want a woman to be, say, in a writer's room. They definitely want to have stuff. I mean, they want to not be discriminatory towards
Right.
women, but I
There is an
don't,
intent, and
there's
this
an intent to
starting,
at least be
or no?
more inclusive, for sure. And I think that also comes from the fact that that the streamers are also like women are playing important positions at important positions of power within those streamers. So I think that also makes a difference. Like, who is the gatekeeper? So I think there are more women, there are more female executives, and I think that has made a difference in terms of the kind of stories that they're more open to. I think it's definitely made a huge difference what they're open to. Also, I think because they are connected to their global, like whatever Netflix India is
Yeah, there is a
connected to.
hierarchy,
Not just,
there's a
but I
policy.
feel like because it's a global organization, it also has context of what's happening in other countries, etc. So I think from that perspective, definitely I think they have been, they've opened out the space for women a lot. A lot of the older female actors have started getting work, and much more space for female protagonists, even in male-led stories. So I think that has been really, that has been quite good. But having said that, in India, I feel like everything eventually comes back to, you know, it starts veering towards the status quo. So I think that thing of focusing on stardom and those kind of things, I think all of that is, you know, trying to be more mainstream, all of that is also coming into the streamers, which is just about how to function in an Indian environment with Indian, what the Indian audience wants, which again comes back to what they've been trained to pay for, etc. So I think it all kind of gets interconnected. So it's not like the streamers are the saviors and now everything's going to be okay. You know, there are
Yeah,
different
still
battles
that's
to be
just,
fought
yes.
here. It's definitely a step up and an opening out of space, particularly I feel for female actors. It's been really, really good.
And filmmakers as well,
Uh,
or no?
Definitely a little bit. Like, at least there's, you know, there's a longer format and more stories to tell. I think more new women can break into direction. Like, if you they end up doing like directing some episodes of a show, more female writers. So I think in that sense it's been great. But it's not like anything you want to say which is you know, like everyone will be
You
with
can say
open
that.
arms and all. But definitely, I think it's been a step up. I think one important thing is that uh, if you're putting something out into a streaming space, you don't have to go to the censor board. So, and there's just like self-regulation. So I think that has been amazing. So for instance, a show like Made in Heaven, we couldn't ever have made it into a film and put it out in the theater. You know, so streaming gave us that space to make that kind of a show. So I think definitely the kind of narratives that one can explore, I think
Okay.
that has definitely opened up.
Right. We need to open this for questions soon. I'm sure we have very many questions from the audience. But before we do that, just one last thing. Where do you see Hindi cinema going? Because on one hand, we see that people are not going to the theaters. Even in terms of the direction, that in terms of the movies, we have either these blockbusters, action-oriented movies, larger than life male protagonists, commodification of women, and on the other hand, we have uh, really sensitive movies that are there, not really though doing well in box office. Most of them opening on OTT platforms. How do you do you think that? What's the future? Where is this industry heading?
I don't know, I wish I had the answer. But I have only one thing to say, which is connected actually to your previous question about streaming, and then the second question, I mean, the last question, which was about theaters. I do feel that there is a tendency now to look at a certain film and say, oh, this is because it's like a picnic bonanza spectacle kind of a film, that, oh, it should be in the theaters. Whereas a more intimate film, which may have some kind of, which is not so mainstream in its narrative voice, being told that, okay, those kind of films should only be seen on a, on a streaming platform in a private space. So I have a big problem with that. And I think that is the one development I think which is quite disheartening, because then you're saying that a community viewing public space, you're shutting that off again
For women.
for women and for alternative kind of narratives. You're saying that public viewing, that community viewing is only if you follow the status quo. And I think that is a problem, because then again, I feel we're going into a space where you're saying like a girl can study at home, no need to come to the public school. Be happy in your own space. So I feel that is a huge problem. And however much we can keep justifying it in terms of economics and all, like I said, I feel there's a historicity to it. So yet again, that same argument is being used and said those kind of films don't deserve to be in the theater because, the finance, the economics is not working. So I think we are back to square one about the discrimination. So that's in this context of post-COVID where a certain kind of film is doing well. The only exception I would say to this are these horror comedies, which I feel at least they have something interesting to say about women and they're doing well.
Alankrita, but you have to acknowledge it is a problem of economics, and it's a pretty, it's become a pretty crippling issue across the world. So it's not just that women-centric films or those. Not even alternative. I'm saying that popular films, like a Rishikesh Mukherjee film today would not release in, an Amol Palekar film would not release in that, because they've not been able to crack this, neither in Hollywood nor here. Hollywood's then gone into the Marvel thing and the superhero and the big spectacles and Dune, etc. Whereas rest of it is going there. I mean, the WG I was having a discussion with, they said hardly any film contracts are coming to us for vetting about theatrical release of films. I mean, they're all meant for OTT platforms. So that is definitely there, but in terms of where is it going, you do have more and more scripts being written, more and more concepts being floated, more and more projects being initiated, which do have prominent women characters, if not female leads there. More people also, like Alankrita makes a breakthrough, it encourages another half dozen at least to immediately start working on it, and another 3 dozen to start writing and feeling, I will. So these subjective initiatives, the objective factors may or may not change yet. I don't know. I can't say about that. But this I definitely see, because I also teach screenwriting. The number of women students who are coming in is definitely increasing. In television, in fact, more than 50% of the writers are women writers. You even have men directors like, say, Anubhav Sinha made Thappad at that time with Taapsee Pannu, knowing full well that it cannot possibly match up to an Article 15, which had become a super hit film. This broke even, but he was okay with that. The next one he's writing also deals with that. So that is beginning to happen in pockets. Will it coalesce into a kind of movement which will then become a juggernaut to form an entire sector unto itself? I don't know. Right now, but they're not straws in the wind. There are actually concrete stuff which is being done, and that Zoya, Rima, even on the OTT platforms, they're beginning to rule. Even Raj and DK, if you see their women characters, there is a certain kind of definition to them. They're not merely foils to the plot. So, ho raha hai.
Slowly but steadily.
But it's not becoming necessarily a force yet. So let's see, fingers crossed.
All right, let's take questions from the audience. Yes.
A very good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. So, when it comes to the depiction of women characters or the female characters in movies, I have had 2 of my favorite movies called Animal and Arjun Reddy, which in Hindi is Kabir Singh. I always told that they are one of my favorite movies of all time, and I've always defended them throughout. But again, we have my female friends and my friends questioning my liking towards them, saying that how can you like them because there's so much of misogyny and all this sex and violence in the movie. But I always defended saying that the importance of the role that the women characters have played in the male characters in both of the movies, be it Animal or Kabir Singh. So what's your view on this?
Who wants to take this?
I haven't seen Arjun Reddy, but I definitely feel I believe in the freedom to watch whatever you want, to engage with whatever you want, and come to your own conclusions. So I don't believe in, I feel there should be discussion and debate, but I don't think that people should not like what they want. They can like whatever they want, and the other side is also right in saying that a certain film may be depicting women in a certain way. But having said that, I haven't seen Arjun Reddy. But that's, I feel in there being freedom of expression to make what you want to make and watch what you want to make, but also freedom to debate and discuss and disagree. So that's what I want to say.
But you saw Kabir Singh. Kabir Singh you saw.
I've not seen Kabir Singh.
Didn't I invite you for a discussion on Animal and you refused?
That's why I didn't go, na. I haven't seen.
Animal.
Animal I've seen, no, I've seen, but that discussion was on a whole bunch, na, and I haven't seen those films. I
Rubbish.
can't.
You just didn't want to come and debate Animal and give it any legitimacy in the public space. Okay, so many women filmmakers refused when I had called them. I said, we must discuss this. I said, we don't even want to lend this much of credibility that it's worthy of discussion. Which is, right now you're saying freedom to debate, so there should be freedom to debate. Yeah, of course, what she said in terms of freedom of expression, freedom of thought, absolutely it has to be upheld at all costs. Like somebody said that I may disagree with that, but I'll defend to death your right to say it. But having said that, interestingly, Kabir Singh, I had not seen, but I saw Arjun Reddy. Actually, I was offered the role of Kabir Singh's father in Kabir Singh. Okay, so they said it's a remake of Arjun Reddy. Why don't you see that, sir? And then we can work out the terms. So I saw that, and I just saw about 30 minutes. I felt so outraged by that at that time. I felt this bile rising, then I shut it off. And I called them and I said, listen, I couldn't complete it. And I'm definitely not acting in this. And I'm suggesting you also don't remake it. Okay? They must have thought this old coot, pretty nutcase, it's a big hit and all. They went ahead and made it, and the role was done by Suresh Oberoi. I refused to see it until I spoke with so many young women in restaurants, at airports, in aircraft, okay, other public places. They all loved it, and I gently questioned them, and they only saw the vulnerability of the character, that yes, he behaved badly, he was disturbed. He didn't know how to express love, which is why he got. But there's violent, etc. But the point is that he truly, genuinely loved her. Okay, and it is, I saw it then after that. I went to the cinema hall and saw it. And I felt that there was a Devdas arc to that. So I could at least get a sense of what is it about that that had appealed to people. Because it became a big hit. Animal will become a very long discussion, but I would just right now rest with what she's saying, that yes, you have the right to see it, because it's far more complex than that. Okay, yeah.
All right, other questions? Okay, 2 questions over there, and then 1 question there, yeah.
Sir, there's
But
this.
hang on, having said that, can't sweepingly confirm, or that I feel that actually, I don't know, it's difficult to say, because the debate also was, does this reflect the increasingly regressive nature of society? That people are beginning to enjoy such films. It's difficult to comment. It may also be so. I will give an example of Lipstick, which I went to see. Okay? And it was shocking and very startling what I saw, that when in fact the female character was being harassed or troubled in a sexual way by the husband. Okay. Oh, there was a whole section of men sitting there. I told you this, you see, downstairs. And they were enjoying, they were laughing at it. And it wasn't an embarrassed laughter out of discomfiture. They were genuinely enjoying that. Okay, a whole family walked out with this disgust, and they started booing them. So there is, I mean, given the kind of, it's very dangerous to comment on anything these days. But yeah, I mean, there seems to be, such forces seem to feel that they are receiving a certain kind of legitimacy. Patriarchy perhaps could be, growing.
It's the young girl at the back who's, yeah.
Alankrita ma'am, as she said, that we need an approval from a lot of patriarchal system to get into the film society as well. As like women have to, get a lot of approval from that side. There's this movie in Telugu. It's a biopic of an actress, Savitri. So in that, there's this particular scene where she tries to make a movie with only female staff, but the people who are giving the loan, they are very like they're contemplating if they can get that guarantee or not. So that mistrust in women has been there like from a very long time, and even now, the smallest jokes as well. It's like ये लड़कियों का काम नहीं है kind of. These all things add up into oppressing. These all things add up into oppressing the voices of women. So don't you think that also plays a part in not leading the women forward?
Yeah, definitely. I feel what you're trying to say is that that cinema and society are obviously interconnected. What is happening in cinema is a reflection of society. The stories that become popular at a certain point in time, that are told at a certain point in time, definitely have something to do with what is going on in society. So that definitely there's a connection. It's like if it's hard for women to make films, it also represents the idea of how it's hard for women to set up many different things. So definitely, I totally agree with you that it's been going on for a while and it is connected. It's not in isolation. Like how you and we were talking about the fact that there are very few women, earlier especially, there used to be such few women in a crew because it was considered like, oh, how is she going to go back home late at night? She has to travel outdoors for 4 months, 3 months for a shoot. So obviously that is also like a connection between society and what is actually happening behind the camera and in front of the camera. So definitely I think all connected, yeah.
And so there's this one question I wanted to ask you. You have screen written for a movie called Veere the Wedding. That movie,
I had what?
screen right? So
No,
you're a
no, no, I
screenwriter,
didn't.
no?
I just acted in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm talking about that movie where the entire movie is about four females who are like who want to live a life of their own, but at the end of the day, they're all of the problems are male centric. Like they're still portraying that men have the upper hand in the society. These people are just struggling to go out of the society.
Did you get that feeling?
Yes, sir.
I'm not so sure
I
whether
mean,
that actually came through
I
there
mean, one
because
of
it
the
is.
person was trying to fight off, like, as in not exactly fight off, but she had this thing that the entire man's family is trying to pressure her into doing stuff that she didn't actually like have a habit of doing. I had like
But they
yeah.
all
Karina
rebelled
Kapoor's, you're
against
talking
Yes,
about
those.
ma'am.
Karina Kapoor's
Yes, ma'am.
character. But see, that character, I think it was also about the fact that she had to figure out her own relationship with her father, right, and her family, and all of that trauma that she had. That trauma influenced her. So this was my interpretation, that the trauma influenced her interactions with everyone else. Her need to always have her own space and not connect, and the fear of getting married, the family expectations, and I think till that particular issue with her father got resolved, I think she was not clear about what she wanted. To my mind, it was a journey of finding herself. But I see what you mean, in the sense it's the larger narrative is that of her getting married. Yeah,
But I just want to say that the truth is that the reason women struggle in most areas of their life, the struggle does stem from the fact that they have to fight a world that doesn't treat them as equals, whether it's at the workplace, it's in your home, whether it's with your own body, whether it's what you want to wear, what you want to think, what you want to do. So the moment you're telling a story about women, it is going to be about how much of herself she can bring forth into this world. So it was always with whether it's subtle or it's whatever, it's often a negotiation with how is she going to deal with what is going on in the world. So her story can't be isolated from the lives of women, and I do think that there's always that negotiation that is going on.
okay. A couple of more questions, I think, maybe, but we keep the answers short. Professor Amar Faruqi's been waiting. Just give us a minute. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So thank you so much for this thought-provoking session. I had two questions, short ones. So I think talking about the inequality at workplace, one major concern could be the pay difference, right? And I remember Amir Khan once talking about justifying this pay difference, this vast pay difference between female leads and male leads, that the male lead is supposed to be anchoring the project and the project makes economic sense because on the basis of the male lead, and no female lead so far can be taking that kind of a responsibility. But I do feel that, the way in which we see the economic might of a female artist like Taylor Swift that has shown to overturn and signs of recession in several US states, and there's a new field of economic studies named after Taylor Swift now. And I think so female, I mean, it's not really about the male or female, but it's about what you're bringing to the market. And I think I would like your comments on how you think Amir Khan's statement, was it justified or not, about this inherent pay gap between male and female leads in the industry right now. The second question is, we see, like you saying that, there is a new, fresh writing coming up and a lot of women characters are gaining very kind of, prominence. But we also see that the Indian film industry right now is also inundated with a lot of films which are certain kind of, agenda, in the sense that to wrong the historic wrongs and to make them right. And in a sense, we are again seeing that women are being pushed back to the backstage, whether it is Panipat or whether it is the new one, Chhawa, and even in which movies like Kerala Files or Article 370, where you see a woman is in the lead character, but that character is also a device of the plot, which is to serve a particular objective, right? So I was thinking whether this trend of overt nationalism and this kind of historical, rewriting the history, is that also like, taking one step forward and two step backwards, this entire idea of women coming in the forefront? So these are my two questions. Thank you.
Okay, short answers.
Yeah. See, if you just look at the current state or the current equations within the film industry, then Amir is right. Because it is, the audience sort of love to watch him, he's the male star and it's male dominated, etc., etc. So yes, he is the one who opens the movie. If he is headlining a film and say Alia Bhatt is headlining a film, obviously the opening that Amir's film will get will be far more than that, because that's what we've been used to. That is what we like. Now, I can't see him. Yeah, thank you. Because he's training his neck to see me. So, given that, that's what I'm saying, that there has to be a reorientation. If you do encourage more movies, entertaining films, well-scripted, well-done films with female leads, the trend will begin to change. Number two, in terms of, what is the second question about the... the whole, yeah. Yeah, there is a whole fantasy now about what, as Romila Thapar says, I mean, the past as present. That the present thinking is now, redefining what history was to sort of align it with what you want the present to be. So saying it was always like this, this is how it was. So you are sort of choosing to be selective and distorting history. And you are also talking about the glory of what Hindu society was, in which, yes, the woman plays that role. The woman is either the victim or the woman is just honorable but doesn't really have any effect on the plot. She remains in the background while the men go out and do their work. Tanaji, Panipat, all these other historicals which you find. This Kerala and all I haven't seen, because I think there would be my health would be affected. Okay, so that's why I need to be careful about that. Yeah, but that is there. It's part of that. That their view of what India was, the glory of India, includes that the position of women was actually this, and this is how it should be. Haven't you heard statements coming from various political and non-political leaders who are influential about what the role of women in society should be for a healthy society? There you go.
Professor Amar Faruqi. It was a similar question. Oh yeah, two. Yes. Pranavati. Just
So mine was more of a reflection, in the way you presented the history of the cinema. So I felt that between what you presented as Devika Rani, and we go to Mother India after that, I felt that there was something there in the middle that shifted Indian cinema.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and that is partition, right? And two movies come to my mind, and I'm just sort of trying to draw these connections. One is Mahal, Kamal Amrohi's. A man affected by partition and moves, and the woman appears as a shadow, a ghostly presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a constant thing of Aika. Aayega
Aayega,
Aane Wala.
Aayega
Aayega
Aane
Aane
Wala.
Wala, na? The song. Yeah, so she's present through her absence in that movie. Yeah. And then there is the hypersexualized imagery of women in Raj
Raj
Kapoor's
Kapoor's.
cinema. And I feel that that sort of sets the tone in some ways until the point we come to, say, Sai Paranjpe. In your narrative arc, until the women get behind the camera, that sort of sustains us through the cinema. So, yeah, this is just a reflection, not as a question, but there is something in that moment that shifts the way we, and partition is again something we don't return to until Garam Hawa in 71 with the Bangladesh war. Yeah.
Partition's hardly been tackled by
Exactly.
Indian cinema. It's
Yeah,
like
and
an
in that movie you
elephant.
find,
Yeah, but that was the book. Yeah, so these are few and far between. I mean,
yeah, and there is something about the absences. Yeah, it's present and yet it's absent. It's almost like Jane Austen's writing, no? In Victorian England, she's talking about England, which is framed by the empire, but the empire goes missing in her story. So it's like that. थोड़ा ऐसा connection मुझे ऐसा लगा. Anyway, just a reflection.
बहुत ज़्यादा intellectual सवाल पूछ लिया आपने.
Okay, okay, ठीक है, छोड़ दीजिए.
No,
नहीं.
to-
But yeah, I will make a comment. I don't know whether this becomes the turning point or the watershed moment. I mean, the way Raj Kapoor because Raj Kapoor began with erotica and then moved. Unfortunately, the line between erotica and sexual objectification kind of got blurred, perhaps, like you see in Satyam Shivam Sundaram or Ram Teri Ganga Maili. So, I don't know. I can't comment that whether that Raj Kapoor coming in was that sort of turning point. As far as the others are concerned, the parallel cinema people, it wasn't just Sai Paranjpe. You also have Benegal, you have people like Govind Nihalani, and you have Ketan Mehta. I mean, Mirch Masala, which was the iconic, the most remembered film about women. Okay, and you've seen Mirch Masala, surely. Yeah. So it was also their progressive outlook. Okay, sensitized them to gender equations and the portrayal of women, their characterization, their character arc, and it was made with confidence. It wasn't an apology कि हाँ छोटा सा बना के कर देते हैं क्योंकि moral compunction है. It was all the things. I mean, Ankur, Nishant, okay, Manthan, okay. Then of course the others which came in. I mean, Govind's, Ketan's, and
पर वो
others.
parallel की तरह आया ना.
I know, वही तो था ना. It needs support. You see, the economics, you must not turn a blind eye to. It's the elephant in the room. Without that falling into place, this is an industry. It needs financial support.
Okay, on that note, let's take a break. And for those of you who still have questions, or you can continue the conversation offline. I'm sure everyone's hungry.
They'll have to travel with me to
Time
the
for lunch
airport.
break. Yes, you
Yes,
and
I
yes,
have no
Anjum
problem.
has to go straight to the airport from here. Absolutely.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you very much. On to you. On to you.
thought-provoking discussion. We'll break for lunch and come back at 2:30. Please do look at the exhibits on the 8th floor as you make your way to lunch. And there are 3 more exciting conversations to follow. And before that, let me invite Professor Rakesh Basan again to hand over mementos as gratitude to our panelists.
And if the cafe, I think, is the cafe on 8th floor open? Then you can also grab some coffee there if you want. It's not open.